All right, as referenced in the political section, when looking at the Ming and Qing, it's a very centralized state. Very centralized state. Hongwu is really going to start that, and what Hongwu and all other emperors after this believe they are the son of heaven. They are more than a human, but less than a god. They're the human designate with heavenly powers. That's why they are entitled to concubines, and the eunuchs live after them. They can sit in the forbidden city and drink wine, and nobody can come in there. At the same, they're looking to portray their greatness and Chinese greatness to the rest of the world. So that's where Zheng He comes in play. That, hey, we're gonna go out and we're gonna show everybody we're awesome. Some of the other things, the kowtow is back, the 3 kneelings and 9 head knockings, and you're punished if you don't do that. Very similar to what you had seen in earlier dynasties with the tribute system. You're flogged with bamboo, and if you don't do it, the wardrobe is very over the top, just very flamboyant, and nobody else could have it. Well, so then let's go to these scholar bureaucrats, that gentry class that has passed the civil service exam, and they are really smart. First, it's only open to males. That shouldn't really surprise you if you know anything about Chinese history, and we will continue looking at that with the next slide. They are educated in calligraphy, poetry, and essays, and that's where you get to potentially one of the defining characteristics of the Ming and Qing dynasties, because both of these have it. It is the 8-legged essay. It's basically a standard-based essay where everybody has to write it the same way. It brought about no real creativity, but it brought about tons of people trying to study for it. No creativity. You have to write in a certain format. And here we go. Only 300 students pass per year. You most of the time have to take it several times before passing it. What you do is you literally be locked in a compound with a makeshift bed and boards that serve as a desk for 3 days and 2 nights. And you have those 3 days and the 2 nights to write it, and it takes the entire time. Some actually die during this, because what happens when you're locked in that chamber, you have a water pitcher, a chamber pot, bedding, food, inkstone, and brushes. Ink and brushes. That's it. And you sit in there and you write this 8-legged essay. By the time we start moving forward in the future, there's about 100 million people who hold 1 million people who hold degrees in the civil service exam in this 8-legged essay. However, there's only 20,000 jobs. So what that means is that it actually gets harder to pass the civil service exam, because what some of the people who didn't pass it, they would become tutors for wealthy family. So yes, officially this exam was open to anybody, and it's definitely a meritocracy going on. However, the rich have a significant advantage because they could pay the tutors to basically mentor people to pass that exam. So yes, there's only so many passes per year. It's officially open to everybody. It is open to everybody, any male. But this 8-legged essay, which sounds absolutely brutal to take, only the wealthy pass it. But again, when you look at how we are with the social hierarchy, it shouldn't really surprise you that, yes, we still have the emperor on top, and here's that second stage, scholar bureaucrats. It's exactly who we're looking at, that gentry class we had before. They are very conservative in nature. That's something that we've talked about before. That scholarly bureaucratic class is wearing distinctive black gowns with blue borders on it, and is adorned with that rank that we talked about before of 1A, 1B, etc. You actually, commoners couldn't call it, and you're actually immune from corporal punishment and exempt from taxes. Meanwhile, basically everybody else, so yeah, that's a few people, because remember, 1 million people sounds like a lot, but their population isn't well in the hundreds of millions, so that's not actually that many people. Most people are still farmers. Peasants are very honorable in Confucian teaching, and so it's very well thought of, even though you don't make a lot of money, but you could make a life. Artisans and workers have higher incomes than most laborers, so just because this is like a Confucian look. Hey, you're the emperor, you're obviously going to be number one. Here's your people educated in Confucianism. Here's your farmers, they're well thought of. Your artisans and workers actually have more money, but not as well thought of in Confucianism. Merchants are not well thought of at all. They're seen as parasites and had no legal protections whatsoever, and they only see their wealth move up because the state likes them. And then my favorite, I think one of my favorite terms for this chapter is mean people. Beggars, boat people of the Guangdong province down there in southeastern China. Yeah. So one thing that is going to continue to grow here is the Chinese social hierarchy of the patriarchal system. Honor the male line of ancestry. Everything goes through that. You're loyal to the son, father, but subject to the emperor. File pieties going on. It's actually the children's job to look after mom and dad's happiness. That sounds like not a bad thing. Family is still big. Family is still big, bigger than just the nuclear family. Clans are in charge of local order, making sure the needs of the needy are taken care of. But now, not surprisingly, that as I kind of highlighted there a little bit earlier, the patriarchy is only going to increase. Boys over girls. Girls are seen as a financial liability. Women are supposed to actually commit suicide if their husbands die. That was considered an honor. You don't remarry at all. Women, you could not divorce. As soon as you're married, you had to demonstrate basically that the husband is the absolute lead in your life. Foot binding as a practice is only going to increase. I mean, it's crazy how much the patriarchal system for the male just continues to increase during this time during Ming and Qing China. Well, that means also with the populations continuing to go up, that means you have more boys that are dominant and the way they see themselves as dominant. In China, while you start to see some of the products come make their way to China from the Columbian Exchange, their population is going to dramatically increase like they had before with just increased nutrition. Here's a chart to show you that. And so they're at 100 million, and then in 1500, 225 million in 1750. That is huge growth. Huge growth. All right, so let's talk economics. So the Ming, at first, they want to go out and they want to show off their prestige. Trade's bringing in growth. I mean, Zheng He himself, that Chinese Muslim who's going all over the place, he got 16 countries to start sending tribute to the Ming. I mean, has huge influences. However, his voyages also steer controversy because people are afraid of too much foreign influence. So, like Young Li is obviously going to really want this. He starts it. But some critics say they look down upon these other cultures and they see that they're barbaric and inferior. So when Young Li dies, his son actually says, nope, too expensive. We're not going to do this anymore. There's too much controversy and too much expense going into this. So he actually starts to discourage people to leave from China. If you built too big a ship, you would actually be fined. So those huge ships that Zheng He had sailed on, they actually basically can't use them anymore. And you start to see government restrictions going in place that said, no, you can't do this anymore. And you're going to start losing ground to the Europeans, mainly due to the fact they were afraid of their influence that they had seen. Now, think about this. This kind of makes sense for what they had. You had the Yuan had come in and changed everything. They don't want anybody to come in and change anything. All right, so Qin Shi Huang is going to come in and start selling limited privileges to the Europeans because they see that they are falling behind. This highly restrictive foreign trade and growing isolation is going to be a major part that's going to look at China here as we move forward into our next unit, that they don't want nothing to do with anybody. They make a deal with the British. Qin Shi Huang makes a deal with the British that they can have access to one port and one port only in Guangzhou. That's it. If you have to conduct your business there, and once you leave there, or once you're done with your business, you leave immediately. Makes the same deal, and they later make a deal with the Portuguese in Macau. Those are the only places where really Europeans are in Europe at all. I'm sorry, in China at all. Highly restrictive, and basically due to the fact they are afraid of these other cultures having dramatic influence on them. China first. Forget everybody else. People still want to trade with them. I mean, they still have silk, porcelain, lacquerware, and tea, but they want to make sure that they are not letting their culture get changed. And that's the last part here. What is going on with their culture? Neo-Confucianism is still the hold. You're combining moral, ethic, and political values of Confucianism with logic and rigor and the powers of Buddhism. It's self-discipline, it's filial piety, it's obedience to rulers. You're setting up huge places to study, even though most people still don't know about it. Because remember, if only 1 million people had passed the civil service exam, well, it's not that many more that are taking it. So academies are being set up. Academies are being set up to make sure to let people pass. Now, a societal change is that more people can now read. So scholars don't like this because they think you should really only be reading the civil service exam. Novels are starting to become entertainment to the people. Now, how about this one? We have Christianity is going to make its way. Well, Tom, that doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at the economics things. Well, you're looking here that the economic deals are made in the 1700s. These start in the 1500s. Here come those Jesuits that were created out of the Council of Trent to China. Matteo Ricci. Little syncretic thing going on here. Christianity had left during the Yuan dynasty, and the goal of Ricci was to convert China to Christianity. So what's he do? He learns Chinese and Confucian classics, and he goes to Beijing. He shows off European power, knowledges of a lot of science and clocks and prisms, and just wows them with Christianity being the goal to try to show that. And what he does is try to show them that Christian and Confucian teachings were similar. Okay, he allows the veneration of ancestors. In other words, what are you looking at here? You have a syncretic Chinese Christian faith getting created. Doesn't work very well. Does not work very well. You have about 200,000 people that are going to convert, which in the grand scheme of things in China isn't big. However, this will learn both sides to learn more about each other. King Xi ordered the end of the preaching of Chinese. It just kind of stops, and those 200,000 people just kind of go away. Now, the Christian faith being in China, that does help China learn about Europe. They don't like what they see, do they? They're going to start restricting influence. And then Europe learns about China. Some elements of the civil service exam will make their way to Europe. All right, so what should we learn from this screencast? Okay, first, you should know Son of Heaven. You should know about the eight-legged essay. Very patriarchal system with the social order being based on basically Confucianism. Basically, trade bringing growth, but over time goes on, you see that them restrict that trade due to fear of loss of culture. And you can think back to the yuan for how that changes even more. But China still wants to get their influence out there. And then lastly, here's an example of they don't want their culture to change. Hey, Christianity, you're going to stop coming to